I stood at the edge of Grandma Ruth's grave, watching dirt fall onto polished wood. 43 years old, and I felt like that scared kid again, the one she'd taken in when my parents died. The preacher's words blurred together while I stared at the farmhouse in the distance, the place that had been my sanctuary for over 3 decades. My cousins clustered nearby, whispering among themselves. Uncle Bill adjusted his tie nervously. Aunt Martha dabbed her eyes with a tissue that looked too clean, too practiced. They'd all driven in from their suburban lives, suddenly very interested in family matters. After the service, we gathered in Grandma's kitchen, the same yellow walls, the same checkered tablecloth, but everything felt different without her humming while she cooked. Bill cleared his throat importantly. "Well, Jake, we need to discuss the estate." His voice carried that tone he'd used since we were kids, the one that reminded me I was the outsider, the charity case. I nodded, expecting to hear about the will, about how Grandma had left me the farm like she'd always promised. Instead, Bill pulled out a stack of papers. "Ruth never updated her will after taking you in. Legally, the farm goes to her blood relatives." He gestured around the room. "We've already divided everything fairly among the family." My stomach dropped. "What do you mean, divided?" Martha spoke up, her voice falsely sympathetic. "The house goes to Bill, I'm taking the livestock, and the boys will split the land for development." I looked around the room, at the people I'd called family, who'd shared Grandma's Sunday dinners and Christmas mornings. Not one of them met my eyes. "But she promised—" "Promises aren't legal documents, Jake." Bill's words cut through my protest like a blade through wheat. The next morning, I walked through the farmhouse one last time. My cousins had worked fast, too fast. Furniture was already tagged with colored stickers indicating who claimed what. Grandma's rocking chair bore Martha's initials. The antique dining set was marked for Bill's oldest son. I climbed the stairs to my old room, the floorboards creaking familiar songs under my feet. Even here, they'd been thorough. The bed I'd slept in for 30 years was tagged for donation. My high school trophies, the ones Grandma had displayed so proudly, were boxed and labeled miscellaneous. In the kitchen, I found Martha packing Grandma's china into newspaper. She looked up when I entered, her expression carefully neutral. "Jake, honey, we saved you some things. There's a box on the porch." I found the box, a small cardboard container holding a few photographs and one of Grandma's aprons. 30 years of life reduced to memories that could fit in my hands. "Is this it?" I asked when Martha joined me outside. She shrugged. "We tried to be fair. Everyone gets something meaningful." Fair. The word tasted bitter. I'd worked this farm every summer, every weekend, every spare moment. I'd fixed fences, fed cattle, and held Grandma's hand through her final illness. But blood trumped love, apparently. "What about the barn?" I asked. "Any tools or equipment I could—" "Already claimed," Bill interrupted, appearing with a clipboard. "But there's an old toolbox out there nobody wanted. Rusted through, mostly useless. You can have that if you want." He said it like he was doing me a favor. The barn felt cavernous and empty. The tractors were gone, sold to a dealer in town. The hayloft stood bare, stripped of everything valuable. Dust motes danced in shafts of afternoon sunlight that slanted through gaps in the weathered boards. I found the toolbox in the far corner, exactly where it had always been. Grandma's husband, my grandfather, though I'd never known him, had built this barn with his own hands. This toolbox had been his, she'd told me once, though she'd never let me open it. "Some things are meant to stay closed, Jake," she'd said whenever my curiosity got the better of me. "Some memories are too heavy for young shoulders." Now, looking at the rusted metal container, I understood why nobody had wanted it. The lock was corroded, the corners eaten through by decades of moisture. It looked like junk, the kind of thing you'd find at a garage sale marked as is for $5. But it was mine now, the only thing left of a life I'd thought was secure. I hefted the box, heavier than expected, and carried it to my truck. As I loaded it into the bed, Martha appeared in the barn doorway. "You sure you want that old thing? It's probably full of rusty nails and broken tools." "It's all I have left," I said simply. She had the grace to look uncomfortable. "Jake, you know we didn't want it to be this way, but legally—" "I know." I slammed the tailgate shut. "I understand perfectly." But I didn't. Not really. How do you understand a lifetime of promises broken in a single afternoon? The Sunset Motel sat on the edge of town, the kind of place where truckers grabbed a few hours of sleep and traveling salesmen counted their losses. My room smelled like disinfectant and old cigarettes, but it was clean and cheap, two qualities that mattered now that I was unemployed and homeless. I set the toolbox on the small table by the window and stared at it. 3 days had passed since the funeral, and I still hadn't worked up the courage to open it. Part of me feared finding nothing but rust and disappointment. Another part worried about disturbing whatever memories Grandma had locked away. Finally, I grabbed a screwdriver from my truck and worked at the corroded lock. It took 20 minutes of careful prying, but eventually the mechanism gave way with a metallic screech that seemed too loud in the quiet room. The lid opened on squeaky hinges, releasing the scent of old metal and something else. Leather, maybe, and the faint sweetness of aged paper. Inside, the toolbox was divided into compartments. The top tray held exactly what I'd expected: rusty wrenches, a broken hammer, screwdrivers with worn handles. But underneath in the main compartment I found something that made my breath catch. Envelopes, dozens of them, tied with a faded blue ribbon. My name was written on each one in Grandma's careful handwriting. For Jake, when the time comes. My hands shook as I untied the ribbon. The paper was yellowed with age, some envelopes dating back decades. I opened the most recent one first, dated just 3 months before Grandma's death. "My dearest Jake," it began, "if you're reading this, then they've taken everything from you, just like I knew they would." I read through the night, moving from letter to letter like a man discovering a hidden room in his own house. Grandma's words painted a picture I'd never imagined, a family history built on secrets and carefully constructed lies. The earliest letter, dated 25 years ago, revealed the first truth. My grandfather hadn't died in a farming accident like I'd been told. He'd been murdered, shot by someone who'd wanted his land. The sheriff had called it a robbery gone wrong, but Grandma knew better. "Your grandfather discovered something," she'd written. "Something about the land that certain people didn't want known. He was going to expose them, but they got to him first." Another letter from 15 years ago contained photocopies of documents, mineral rights surveys, geological reports, correspondence between my grandfather and a mining company. The farm sat on top of a significant natural gas deposit, worth millions. "They killed him for this knowledge," Grandma had written, "and they've been waiting ever since for me to die so they could claim it all." The most shocking revelation came in a letter dated just 5 years ago. Bill, my uncle, the man who'd raised me after my parents' death, wasn't actually Grandma's son. He was her stepson, adopted when she'd briefly remarried after my grandfather's death. That marriage had lasted only 2 years, ending when Grandma discovered her new husband's connection to the men who'd killed her first husband. "Bill never knew the truth about his adoption," she'd written. "But his biological father was one of the men who wanted your grandfather dead. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree, Jake. Bill's been feeding information to the wrong people for years, thinking he was just helping with business opportunities." I sat back in the motel chair, my mind reeling. Everything I'd believed about my family was a lie. The final envelope was thicker than the others, sealed with red wax that bore the impression of an old signet ring. Inside, I found a document that made my heart race. A will, properly notarized and witnessed, dated just 6 months before Grandma's death. "Last will and testament of Ruth Elizabeth Morrison," it read. She'd left everything to me, the farm, the house, the mineral rights, everything. But more importantly, she'd included a letter explaining why she'd hidden this will. I knew they were watching, Jake. Bill's been reporting to his biological father's associates for years, thinking he was just sharing family news. They've been waiting for me to die so they could swoop in and claim the mineral rights. The will they found in my desk drawer, the old one, that was bait. I wanted them to think they'd won. She'd hidden the real will in the one place she knew they'd never look, the toolbox they considered worthless junk. "Take this to Samuel Chen at Chen and Associates in the city," she'd instructed. "He's been waiting for you to contact him. He has additional documents that will prove your legal right to everything, plus evidence about your grandfather's murder that was covered up all those years ago." My hands trembled as I read the final paragraph. "I'm sorry I couldn't tell you while I was alive, Jake. I was protecting you the only way I knew how. But now it's time for you to fight back. Don't let them steal what's rightfully yours. Don't let your grandfather's death be for nothing." I looked at my watch. 3:47 a.m. Too late to call a lawyer, but not too late to start planning. For the first time in days, I felt something other than grief and betrayal. I felt hope. Samuel Chen's office occupied the top floor of a gleaming downtown building, all glass and steel that seemed a world away from farmland and toolboxes. The lawyer himself was younger than I'd expected, maybe 40, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. "Jake Morrison," he said, rising from behind his desk. "I've been waiting for this day for 6 months." He'd known Grandma for over a decade, he explained, ever since she'd first suspected the truth about my grandfather's death. Together, they'd built an airtight case, not just for my inheritance, but for justice. "Your grandmother was remarkable," Chen said, pulling out a thick file. "She documented everything: phone calls, meetings, financial transactions. She even hired a private investigator to track down witnesses to your grandfather's murder." The evidence was overwhelming. Bill's biological father, Thomas Crane, had been part of a consortium trying to buy up mineral rights throughout the county. When my grandfather refused to sell, they'd escalated to intimidation, then violence. The sheriff at the time had been on their payroll. "The statute of limitations has run out on the murder," Chen explained, "but the conspiracy to defraud you of your inheritance is very much actionable. Plus, we have evidence of ongoing mineral rights theft that's been happening for decades." He showed me maps, geological surveys, financial records. The natural gas deposits under the farm were worth an estimated $12 million. The consortium had been quietly extracting gas from neighboring properties, using horizontal drilling to tap into reserves that legally belonged to my family. "Your Uncle Bill has been unknowingly feeding them information for years," Chen continued. "They've been using him to monitor your grandmother's health, waiting for the right moment to move on the property." "What do we do now?" I asked. Chen smiled grimly. "Now we take back what's yours." I drove back to the farm that afternoon, the real will tucked safely in my jacket pocket. Bill's truck was parked in the driveway. He'd been staying in the house, already treating it like his own. I found him in the kitchen, going through Grandma's papers. He looked up when I entered, his expression shifting from surprise to annoyance. "Jake, what are you doing here? I thought you'd moved on." "We need to talk, Uncle Bill." I pulled out a chair and sat down across from him. "About Grandma's real will." His face went pale. "What do you mean, real will?" I placed the document on the table between us. "She left everything to me, Bill. The farm, the house, the mineral rights, everything." He stared at the papers like they might bite him. "That's impossible. We found her will. It was in her desk." "That was the old will. She wanted you to find it." I leaned forward. "She knew about the gas deposits, Bill. She knew about your biological father and his associates. She knew you'd been feeding them information." The color drained completely from his face. "My biological father? Jake, what are you talking about? My father died when I was 3. Thomas Crane didn't die, Bill. He's very much alive, and he's been using you to spy on our family for decades." I watched understanding dawn in his eyes, followed quickly by horror. No, that's not possible. Tom's just a business associate. He's helped me with investments, given me advice. He's been using you." I pulled out copies of the evidence Chen had shown me. "Look at these phone records, Bill. Every time you called him with family updates, he passed that information to his consortium. They've been stealing gas from under our land for 20 years. Bill's hands shook as he examined the documents. "I didn't know. Jake, I swear I didn't know." Looking at him, really looking, I saw a man who'd been manipulated just as much as I had, only in a different way. "Tell me about Tom Crane," I said gently. "How did you meet him?" Bill slumped in his chair, suddenly looking every one of his 62 years. "He contacted me about 15 years ago. Said he'd known my birth parents, wanted to help me understand my heritage. I was adopted as a baby. Ruth never talked about it much." "What did he tell you?" "That my father had been a businessman, involved in land development. He said the family had some ongoing interests in this area, and he wanted to keep me informed about opportunities." Bill's voice grew smaller. "He seemed so genuine, so interested in my welfare." I felt a stab of sympathy. Bill had been searching for connection, for family history, and Crane had exploited that need. "He'd call every few months," Bill continued. "Ask about Ruth's health, about the farm. Said he was looking out for family interests. When he suggested I should be more involved in estate planning, it seemed like good advice." "Did he ever mention mineral rights?" "Once or twice. Said the land might have development potential, that I should make sure any will address subsurface rights properly." Bill looked up at me with dawning horror. "Oh God, Jake! He was using me to steal from my own family." "Not your family, Bill. Our family." I reached across the table and squeezed his shoulder. "Grandma considered you her son, blood or not. That's why this hurts so much." Tears started flowing down his weathered cheeks. "I thought I was protecting everyone's interests." "When Ruth died and we found that old will, Tom said it was probably for the best, that you weren't equipped to handle such a complex estate. And you believed him." I wanted to believe him. Bill wiped his eyes. "I've spent my whole life feeling like an outsider, Jake. When Tom made me feel like I belonged to something bigger, like I had real family looking out for me, I guess I stopped thinking clearly." The next morning, I drove to the address Chen had given me, Thomas Crane's office in a nondescript building on the industrial side of town. Bill sat beside me, nervous but determined to face the truth. Crane's secretary tried to turn us away, but I'd learned a few things about persistence from 30 years of farm work. We waited in the lobby until Crane himself appeared, a silver-haired man in an expensive suit, who looked like he'd stepped out of a corporate boardroom. "Billy!" he said warmly, embracing my uncle. "What brings you here, and who's your friend?" "This is Jake Morrison," Bill said quietly. "Ruth's grandson." Something flickered behind Crane's eyes. Calculation maybe, or concern. "Ah, the young man who's been causing such a stir. I'm sorry for your loss, Jake. Ruth was a remarkable woman." "Remarkable enough to outwit you for 30 years, I replied. Crane's smile faltered slightly. "I'm not sure what you mean." I pulled out copies of the documents Chen had prepared. The real will, the mineral rights surveys, the evidence of illegal extraction. "I mean, she knew exactly who you were and what you'd done to my grandfather." The mask slipped completely then. Crane's genial expression hardened into something cold and calculating. "You can't prove anything." "Actually, we can." I spread the papers on his desk. Horizontal drilling records, extraction reports, financial transfers. "You've been stealing from my family for decades." Bill stepped forward, his voice shaking with anger. "You used me. You made me betray the only real family I ever had." Crane barely glanced at him. "You were useful, Billy. Nothing more." The casual cruelty of those words hit Bill like a physical blow. I watched my uncle, This man who'd helped raise me despite his own confusion and pain straightened his shoulders with new resolve. "It's over, Tom," Bill said firmly. "Whatever game you've been playing, it ends now." The legal proceedings moved faster than I'd expected. Chen had built such a solid case that Crane's lawyers advised him to settle rather than face criminal charges. The consortium agreed to pay restitution for 20 years of stolen mineral rights plus damages. The final settlement was more money than I'd ever imagined, enough to restore the farm, pay off debts, and secure my future. But more importantly, it vindicated my grandfather's memory and honored Grandma's decades-long fight for justice. Bill and I stood in the farmhouse kitchen on a crisp October morning, watching contractors repair the damage his cousins had done in their haste to strip the place. Martha had returned the china, shame-faced and apologetic. The others had grudgingly given back furniture and equipment, though the relationships would never be the same. "I keep thinking about all those years," Bill said, staring out at the fields where corn was growing again. "All those phone calls, all that information I passed along. I helped them hurt you, Jake." "You didn't know," I reminded him. "Crane was a professional manipulator. He exploited your need to belong. But I should have questioned it, should have wondered why he was so interested in family business." Bill turned to face me. "How do you forgive something like that?" I thought about Grandma's letters, about the pain and loneliness she must have felt keeping all those secrets. Grandma forgave you long before you ever needed forgiving. She knew you were being used, but she also knew your heart was in the right place. She was protecting all of us, wasn't she? In her own way? Yes. I handed him a letter I'd been saving, one Grandma had written specifically for him. "She wanted you to have this." Bill read it with tears in his eyes. Grandma had explained everything: his adoption, his biological father's crimes, her decision to keep him in the dark to protect him from the truth. "She loved you, Bill, as much as any mother loves a son." 6 months later, the farm was thriving again. I'd hired back the workers who'd been let go when the family thought they were selling the land. The cattle were healthy, the fields were productive, and the old farmhouse rang with laughter for the first time since Grandma's death. Bill had moved back into the guest room, helping me run the operation. We'd found an easy rhythm. He handled the business side while I focused on the actual farming. It wasn't the same as having Grandma there, but it was good. It was family. Martha visited occasionally, bringing her grandchildren to see the animals. The relationship was still strained, but we were working on it. Forgiveness, I'd learned, was a process, not an event. The mineral rights provided steady income that allowed us to modernize equipment and expand operations. But I was careful not to let the money change the essential character of the place. This was still the farm where Grandma had raised me, where she'd taught me the value of hard work and honest living. I'd kept the toolbox on my bedroom dresser, a reminder of how close I'd come to losing everything. Sometimes I'd run my fingers over the rusted metal and think about the courage it must have taken for Grandma to keep those secrets all those years. One evening, as Bill and I sat on the porch watching the sunset, he asked the question I'd been expecting. "Do you think she knew about how it would all turn out?" I considered this, watching the last light fade over fields that were truly mine now. I think she hoped. I think she trusted that love would win in the end. And did it? I looked at the man who'd raised me, who'd been manipulated and used but had found his way back to family anyway. "Yeah, Bill, I think it did." 1 year after Grandma's funeral, I stood in the same cemetery, but this time I wasn't alone. Bill was there, along with Martha and her family, and even a few neighbors who'd known Grandma well. We'd come to dedicate a new headstone, one that told the truth about both my grandparents. "Here lies Ruth Elizabeth Morrison," it read, "beloved wife, mother, and grandmother. She kept the faith and protected what mattered most." Below that, "And James Morrison, loving husband and father who died defending what was right." I placed fresh flowers on the grave and stepped back. The toolbox sat beside the headstone. Not the rusted one from the barn, but a new one I'd had made, filled with letters I'd written to Grandma over the past year. Updates on the farm, thoughts about family, gratitude for the lessons she'd taught me. "Thank you," I whispered to the stone, "for everything." As we walked back to the trucks, Bill fell into step beside me. "She'd be proud, you know, of what you've built, how you've handled everything." "We've built," I corrected. "This is your home too, Bill. It always was." He smiled, the first truly peaceful expression I'd seen on his face in months. "I know. I finally know." The farm spread out before us as we drove home. Green fields, white fences, the old farmhouse with smoke rising from its chimney. It looked exactly like it had when I was a child, when Grandma would call me in for dinner and tell me stories about the land and the people who'd worked it. But now I knew the whole story. The pain and the triumph, the secrets and the truth, the love that had sustained it all through decades of hardship and betrayal. And I knew that sometimes the most valuable inheritance isn't money or land. It's the courage to fight for what's right, even when the odds seem impossible.